They told you this place was a sanctuary, a haven for weary souls under Maine's grey sky. But what you were never meant to hear is what crawled beneath the floorboards, soaked into the beams, and lingered behind Widow Grey's gentle smile. Listen close, because this is no fireside ghost story. This is a secret you'll wish you could unhear. In the winter of 1875, on the edge of a snowbound forest near Kennebunk, there stood a crooked little inn. Travellers called it a warm rest stop on the coastal road to Portland. Locals called it the Widow's Refuge. And for good reason. Hannah Gray, the innkeeper, was a woman twice widowed, both husbands dead by misadventure, or so the town records say. She kept her sorrow wrapped tight in black lace, her hair pinned neat beneath a bonnet of mourning, but behind that black fabric, her eyes glittered with something that didn't match her pious kindness. You see, secrets crave silence, but silence rots when too many voices vanish inside its walls, and the widow's inn devoured voices. One by one they disappeared, fishermen caught in storms, drifters bound for the lumber camps, peddlers passing through. The snow would swallow their footprints by dawn, and Widow Grey would serve another steaming bowl of rabbit stew by the hearth as if nothing ever happened. And the town. They loved her, a godly woman caring for the lost. They praised her charity, blessed her grieving heart, never daring to peer too close at the cellar door she kept locked behind the pantry. But tonight, you and I, we'll open that door. We'll drag up what the snow tried to bury, because every rotten plank, every blood-caked brick in that cellar speaks. And when you hear what they whisper, you'll understand why some secrets must stay buried, and why the people who dig too deep never leave the widow's refuge alive. Don't turn away now. There's no road back once you know what we're about to know. Let me show you how a widow turned an entire winter into her private season of slaughter, and why the truth about Hannah Gray was never meant to outlive the snows of Maine. When the first heavy snows fell in December of 1874, the Widow Gray's inn glowed like a lantern on that lonely stretch of forest road. Travellers spoke of her hearth's warmth, the smell of her stews drifting out onto the frost-bitten wind. They called her an angel of mercy, a frail woman, cheeks hollow with grief, who opened her door to any man with coin and hunger in his eyes. But that winter, something different settled into the bones of the inn. Some say it was grief made flesh. Some say it was something older, a hunger that wore Hannah's skin like a borrowed cloak. The ledger she kept by the front desk showed 17 names that winter. 17 men who signed for a bed by the fire, who thanked the widow for her kindness, who never signed out again. A trap doesn't reveal itself to the mouse until the iron teeth snap shut. By the time they smelled the lie in her kindness, they were already part of the walls. You see, Hannah knew the road better than any constable. She knew when storms would force men to her door. She knew when the river froze too deep for escape. And she knew how to keep a man still. A sip of bitter cordial she'd pour with trembling hands, whispering apologies for the taste, blaming the bitterness on old herbs and grief. They'd drink it down, and when sleep dragged them under, she'd kneel by the hearth and hum her dead husband's favourite hymn while the snow muffled the screams. They say the cellar grew warm from more than the fire upstairs, that its stones wept when spring thawed the ground, but the town saw none of that. They saw a widow too holy for suspicion. They saw the fresh linen on the beds, the warm bread rising on her windowsill. They saw charity, and charity blinded them to the bootprints that led to her root cellar, but never back out. Tell me, would you have seen it? Or would you too have smiled at her soft voice, her trembling hay-cheeked hands, and lain down under her roof, grateful for a dry blanket while the storm howled outside? Look closer. You're not here to rest. You're here to see the rot inside the kindness, the black blood clotting beneath the snow. The town of Kennebunk prided itself on good Christian folk, farmers, fishermen, tradesmen who nodded politely when passing Widow Gray's inn on the frost-bitten road. No one asked why the shutters stayed closed long after dawn. No one questioned why the smoke from her chimney never ceased, even on nights when no guest was seen entering or leaving. Hannah Gray knew people trust routine more than truth. She wove her routine like a black widow weaves silk. Each dawn she'd appear in town, bonnet drawn, basket on her arm, breath ghosting in the cold air. She'd buy flour, salt pork, candles, and pipe tobacco she never smoked. She'd nod to the reverend, press pennies into the palm of the town orphan boy, smile at the doctor's wife. Always that gentle smile, a crack in the mask wide enough to keep suspicion at bay. And when the church ladies asked after her sorrow, she'd bow her head and whisper how her heart still ached for poor John Gray, drowned on the frozen river, and for dear young Samuel, her only son, taken by fever. Tragedy sanctified her. To pity is to blind oneself. So while the town pitied Hannah, her cellar door stayed locked, and in that stone throat beneath her kitchen floor, voices begged and broke. The travellers who signed her ledger trusted that same soft smile. They came alone, tired, pockets jingling with silver wages. They were easy men to make vanish, fishermen chasing winter cod, log drivers, drifters who left no kin but the bottle in their coat pocket. She'd feed them stew, bread torn by her trembling hands, pour that bitter cordial with apologies, and when their heads bowed heavy, she'd ease them down the narrow stairs, the lantern flickering in her hand. There, where the earth kept its secrets cold and deep, Hannah worked. She learned the weight of a man's bones. She learned how blood soaks pine planks, how long it takes to turn marrow into silency. And when her hands ached from the saw, she'd whisper prayers over the pieces, stacking them neat in crates marked for firewood, salted sacks bound for the river. By dawn, all that remained of their warmth rose as steam from her hearth. Outside, the forest shivered. Wolves watched from the tree line. But wolves only take what they need. Hannah Gray took it all, warmth, coin, name, voice, and left behind a lie the town fed with pity. This is how a holy lie grows fangs. Keep listening. We're not done in her cellar yet. When spring finally came in 1875, the river thawed, and the road out of Kennebunk uncurled from under its icy shroud. Wagons rolled again, fishermen returned to the docks, and the town's good folk gathered at the church to thank Providence for another winter survived. Widow Gray sat in the second pew, hands folded over her black skirts, eyes downcast, a ghost in mourning lace. Reverend Atwood, a portly man who prided himself on tending his flock like lambs, praised her faith to all who'd listen. A woman who's suffered so much yet opens her door to the lost, he'd whisper behind his pulpit. But Hannah's door didn't open so freely come thaw. Those who lingered too long at her table found excuses to cut their stay short. Or so the town thought. They left notes pinned to the door. Gone to Portland, may return. They never did. The ledgers vanished. The constable, old Giles Avery, came only once to ask after a peddler who hadn't reached the next township. Hannah served him tea sweetened with heavy molasses, and spoke so gently of the stranger's hurried departure that Giles scratched his beard and grunted, "Storm'll swallow a man faster than any wolf. Best be on my way then." By the time he left her porch, the peddler's name was just another ghost drifting through the spruce trees. But not every secret stays buried under snow. Some thaw with the river, some speak through restless crows picking at shallow graves in thawed earth. And when they do, the Widow Gray's mask slips, just enough for the right eyes to glimpse the pit behind the smile. You and I, we're those eyes now, and we're going deeper. The first true crack came on a warm night in May, when a farm boy named Silas Merton, wandering drunk through the woods, staggered too close to Widow Gray's back shed. He thought he'd find firewood, or maybe the widow herself. Rumours said she favoured strapping lads with soft mars. Anna's. What he found was a smell that didn't belong to spring. Coppery, thick, crawling up his nose like flies on spoiled meat.
Behind the shed's warped door, Silas found crates half buried in sawdust. He cracked one open with numb fingers. Inside, salt-packed burlap. Wet, heavy. A piece of cloth. Then the unmistakable shape of a hand, stiff, the skin like wax. Silas ran all the way to the mill road, mouth dry as bone. But by dawn Silas was gone too. Some said he sobered up and fled to Boston. Others whispered he'd returned to the shed for another look, and never made it home. His mother kept his room ready for years, candle burning in the window. But the Widow Grey's hearth burned brighter than that little flame, brighter and far more hungry. When townsfolk wondered aloud about the smell near the shed, Hannah said the old barrels held salted venison for lean months. She'd lift a corner of burlap, reveal a hunk of grey meat that might have once been deer, and chuckle at their squeamishness. They'd nod, embarrassed by their own suspicion, and let her close the lid. Respectable folk fear shame more than evil. Hannah knew that. She knew how to turn their horror into guilt with a single tear slipping down her lined cheek. And when that failed, she leaned on the church. Reverend Atwood preached of charity, of not bearing false witness. He warned that gossip could ruin a godly woman's fragile heart. So the town turned away from the smell. They turned away from the missing. They turned away from Hannah Gray's cellar door, heavy latch sealed tight with an iron padlock polished by her own trembling hands. But not everyone turned away. There's always someone who looks too long into the dark. Someone who tastes the rot behind the Sunday hymns. That someone was Jonah Teague, a schoolteacher with ink-stained sleeves and a habit of asking questions no one wanted asked.
Jonah had no kin in Kennebunk, no children of his own. His only company was a black dog named Abel and the thin ledger where he recorded his students' absences. He noticed when fathers didn't return from logging camps. He noticed when fishermen never came back for their promised share of spring catch. And when his own brother, Enoch, a trapper from Biddeford, vanished after telling Jonah he'd spend the stormy night at Widow Gray's, Jonah knew the polite lies had teeth. He started asking after the ledger. He'd sit at the tavern, lean close to a fisherman's cracked lips, and ask, "When did you last see Reuben Hale? Jeremiah Cobb? Michael Dunn?" The names piled up like driftwood against the truth's floodgate. The tavern keeper, a man with more debt than courage, muttered for Jonah to mind his own. The widow was a blessing, didn't he see that? But Jonah kept scratching the rot open. He scribbled dates, crossed off names. He watched the Widow Gray's house from the tree line, Abel pressed to his side, black fur bristling. And one night in late May, under a moon white as a butcher's blade, Jonah watched her drag something heavy through the orchard toward the river's bend. He followed. And what he saw cracked the last shield around the lie. By the river, under the gnarled arms of an ancient pine, Hannah Gray knelt beside a canvas sack. Her lamp guttered in the wind. Jonah crouched behind a fallen log, the dog at his feet, both holding their breath. He saw her untie the rope at the sack's neck. He saw what tumbled out, a man's shoulder, pale as milk in moonlight, a hand stiff in frozen prayer. The widow did not pray over him. She did not weep. She pulled a rusted blade from her apron and sawed flesh from bone, working the corpse like a butcher dressing a hog. Jonah tasted bile in his throat, but did not move. Abel trembled beside him, low growl curling from his ribs. When the work was done, Hannah wrapped the meat in oilskin, tied it tight, and slipped it into the river's black mouth. The bones she stacked under brush, burying them shallow. Jonah fled before she could lift her lamp. He stumbled through the pines, mind tearing at itself. Widow Gray, the holy woman, the grieving soul, feeding the forest with men no one would claim. And yet the next Sunday she sat in the second pew, hands folded, bonnet low. No one knew, except Jonah Teague. And now you. Jonah tried to tell them. He stood in the churchyard after service, eyes wild, breath ragged. He grabbed Reverend Atwood's sleeve, whispering frantic words of bone and blood and black water. Atwood recoiled, not from the horror, but from the scandal. "These are grave accusations, Jonah," the Reverend hissed. "Unfounded. You've always been an odd man. Lonely men see devils in shadows." But Jonah would not bow to shame. He cornered the constable on the tavern steps, spat truth at his boots. Constable Avery shook his head, voice heavy with fear. "Even if it's true, what would you have us do, Teague? Dig up her cellar? Accuse a widow in front of the whole town? Folk would hang you for cruelty to a grieving woman." That was Kennebunk's secret strength. Protect the lie, guard the pity, never let rot show through the white clapboards and church bells. But Jonah Teague didn't understand that pity is stronger than proof. He thought truth could drag sin to the gallows. He was wrong, and the Widow Grey knew he was wrong. That night, Jonah's lamp burned in his schoolhouse window long after midnight, and by dawn it flickered out for good. They found Jonah's black dog, Abel, wandering the orchard, muzzle stained with something that might have been mud. But they never found Jonah. His ledger vanished too. Some say Hannah Gray stood in the schoolhouse doorway that morning, apron clean, hands folded over her belly, whispering a prayer for the lost soul of Jonah Teague. Others say she hummed a lullaby, the same hymn she'd sung by her husband's deathbeds. By summer's end, Kennebunk's polite questions died like weeds under salt. The river ran clear again. The orchard bloomed bright with apples no one picked. And the Widow Grey's inn stayed open, warm, inviting, a beacon for men who travelled light and left no footprints behind. The road called to them. The hearth promised warmth, the cordial promised sleep, and behind her cellar door the stones waited, hungry for what the Widow Grey fed them, hungry for the next lost soul who'd trust a trembling smile and a bowl of rabbit stew. And now, so do you. When the harvest moon rose that autumn, the widow's orchard bore fruits sweeter than any the town had tasted, apples fat and ruddy, pears bursting with sugar. Children snuck through the fence to steal them by the basket. Parents thanked Hannah with polite nods, never asking how barren soil fed such bounty. They bit through skin and pulp, swallowing the season's secret without a second thought. A good harvest silences questions, and in Kennebunk, silence was the real crop. But sometimes silence rots from the inside. One boy, Nathan Wells, just 7, brought an apple home split clean down the middle by a worm. Inside was no worm, but something grey and curled, soft as spoiled marrow. His mother screamed, but by morning the evidence was gone, buried under the kitchen garden at dawn, while her husband whispered about the need to keep good neighbourly peace. The orchard stayed full, and the Widow Grey's guests kept comms. Zinkte. The boy who found the rotten core grew pale that winter, eyes sunken, voice hollow. Some say he saw shapes moving under the snow at night, shapes dragging sacks toward the river's bend. When he spoke of them, his father slapped him silent. Best not to listen to children when the truth is more terrible than the lie. By Christmas of 1875, snow blanketed every grave mistake Kennebunk had made. The church was packed for midnight service. Families gathered tight to warm the bones of another harsh year survived. And there she was, Hannah Gray, in her black lace, sitting near the front, like a saint draped in mourning. Reverend Atwood raised his voice, thundered about redemption, about God's mercy washing sin clean as snowfall. Hannah wept into her handkerchief, her shoulders trembling. A young fisherman in the back row, Elias York, watched her instead of the cross. He'd lost his brother that spring, a river hand, last seen warming his feet by Hannah's hearth. No grave for him, no grave at all. Just a soft word from the widow about how he'd left for Boston to seek work. But Elias knew better. He'd seen the ledgers once when delivering coal, names crossed out in neat lines. He saw his brother's signature among them, a ghost inked in iron gall. That night after service, Elias waited by her orchard gate. He asked no questions. He simply followed her lantern through the trees, past the shed where salt barrels wept brine into frozen roots. What passed between them under that moon no tongue ever told. But come dawn, the orchard soil was torn open by a man's boot heel, a shallow grave hastily dug. Inside, beneath roots tangled like knotted veins, was a jawbone. Human. Tooth cracked clean by a butcher's blade. The widow found Elias before the town did. The constable found his boots at the river's edge, toes pointed toward the deep. No body, no grave, just another echo swall, lowered by black water. You might wonder, how did she do it? A frail woman, shoulders stooped, hands trembling with age and grief. How could she drag grown men to her cellar? How could she silence cries that should have split the pines for miles? Some say grief can hollow a person until what remains is a vessel for something else. Something old. Something hungry. Whispers drifted through the pines about the Grey family. Tales older than Hannah, older than Maine itself. Stories of barren wives who whispered to stones under new moon, of men who vanished in fields that never yielded wheat, but always bore red flowers in spring. Hannah's mother, Ruth, was said to speak to the dead through the orchard trees. Her grandmother, Tabitha, vanished one winter night and left behind only a cellar door swinging open in the wind. When the snows fell, the Grey women buried their sins deep, but roots drink deep too. Maybe what Hannah did wasn't her doing at all. Maybe grief is just the mask an older hunger wears when it wants a body to work its will. You can believe that or not. The cellar door stayed locked either way. As spring returned, rumours slithered past shuttered windows. They flickered in candle-lit kitchens, whispered behind cupped hands. Why did the widow never hire help? Why did peddlers vanish between Kennebunk and Wells, yet leave their coin behind in the widow's larder? But rumours are small things, brittle, easy to crush under guilt and shame. Those who spoke too loud found fresh pies on their stoops, baskets of apples at their door come dawn, and when the widow pressed a cold hand to theirs in church, murmuring prayers for their ailing mother or debts owed, suspicions soured to gratitude. She fed them. She clothed the poor in leftover coats. She soothed the old with broth and scripture. She kept the town's secrets safe in her root cellar, so the town, in turn, kept hers safe above ground. It's easy to trade conscience for comfort, easy to bury truth under sweet-smelling soil, harder to dig it back up when the bones begin to stir. One night, under a waning crescent, the orchard caught fire. Some blamed lightning, others said a lantern overturned by wind. But those who saw it, truly saw it, spoke of no storm that night. No wind, but the breath of something restless. Flames leapt through the branches like fingers tearing at secrets buried too long. Neighbours formed a bucket chain from the river, but the orchard burned itself clean to the roots before they could douse it. When dawn broke, the trees were black skeletons, the earth beneath them soft and wet, smoking like a wound. In the ashes, the constable found shards of bone, teeth like yellow pearls, scraps of cloth that never belonged to orchard hands. Hannah stood by the smouldering gate, hands clasped as though in prayer, eyes dry. When asked, she whispered, "God's will. Some things must be purged by fire." The town believed her. They always did. And when the orchard sprouted new shoots weeks later, young, green, impossibly fast, no one dared ask what roots fed that sudden spring. This is where you pause, not to rest, but to see the pattern. Evil doesn't hide in shadows. It hides in plain sight, wearing the mask of charity, of piety, of grief too perfect to touch. The widow Grey was no monster under the bed. She was the bed, the hearth, the roof over your weary head. And the cellar, just an old stone throat, swallowing what no one wanted found. Now, if you've followed me this far, you see it too. The method behind the mercy, the rot in the roots. But seeing isn't enough. To walk this path is to name it aloud. If you want this descent to change you, write this in the comments twice. I see the cellar door. Once to open it, once to step inside. And when you do, the story binds you to its truth.
After the fire, Hannah's grief deepened. Her hair, once iron grey, turned white as new snow. Her shoulders hunched lower. She told the Reverend she'd seen visions in the flames, her dead husband calling from the orchard's heart, begging her to rest, to stop her work. But still she opened her door to drifters and travellers. Still the cellar latch turned under moonlight. Only now she whispered prayers as she worked, humming to drown out the voices. Some nights the pines echoed her song, a thin, wavering note that slipped between branches and made the wolves howl at nothing. If you'd stood by her window then, you'd have seen her lantern bobbing in the dark like a will-o'-the-wisp. A soul guiding the lost not home, but deeper into the frozen earth. By the winter of 1876, the widow's legend spread beyond Kennebunk. The road was notorious among traders. Stay clear of the grey house if you valued your sleep untroubled by dreams. Yet men came anyway, driven by hunger, drink, or the false comfort of a fire when the wind turned murderous. Some swore they'd heard voices in the walls at night. Others claimed the cellar door thumped from below like a heart beating through stone. A few lucky ones fled before the cordial touched their lips, but they never made it far. The snow keeps secrets well. The river, even better. And those who dared whisper of the bones beneath the orchard roots found themselves drifting downriver, faces bloated, throats stuffed with orchard leaves. "Coincidence," said the constable. "Winter claims fools faster than truth does." But the truth was hungry, waiting. It needed only one crack to spill out. That crack came in the form of a stranger, not a drifter, but a man who hunted secrets for coin, a Pinkerton. His name was Thomas Grady, a Pinkerton detective whose coat carried the scent of faraway cities and fresh tobacco. He came on rumour, paid by a fath, in Boston, whose son vanished along the coastal road, last seen sharing a supper of lamb and cider at Widow Gray's table. Grady booked a room at the town's only inn, asked polite questions at the tavern, bought cider for loose tongues. What he heard chilled him more than the winter sea. Too many drifters, too many rumours of a cellar no one entered twice. On the second night, Grady walked the mile to the widow's house alone, moonlight slicing the orchard's ruins into jagged shadows. He knocked once, twice. Hannah answered, shawl drawn tight, lantern spilling a circle of warmth over the snow. "Are you lost, sir?" she asked, voice like silk draped over a blade. Grady smiled his detective's smile, the one that made crooks confess and widows weep. "No, ma'am. I'm exactly where I need to be." She stepped aside and the door swallowed him whole. The widow served him broth and black bread, the same kindness that felled stronger men. But Grady was no common drifter. He watched the cup at his lips, the steam curling from the bowl. When her back turned to stir the hearth, he poured the broth into his cuff, staining his linen dark. He spoke gentle questions. Her answers danced like mist. Grief, charity, God's will. But her eyes betrayed her, flicking once too often toward the cellar door beneath the stair. Grady noted it all, thumb brushing the pistol hidden at his hip. He asked if he might stay the night. "The road's long," he said. "Your kindness a blessing." Hannah smiled, teeth like old ivory, and led him to a narrow bed by the upstairs hall. He did not sleep. When her lantern dimmed, he waited for the boards to creak. When they did, he rose, boots silent, and followed the widow's shadow to the cellar's mouth. There, he pressed his ear to cold oak and heard it, the muffled rustle of cloth, the wet drag of something heavy over stone. Grady forced the door. The hinges groaned like a dying man's throat. Below, the lantern swung in Hannah's hand, casting grotesque shapes on stone walls, slick with winter damp. She turned, startled but not afraid. Her mouth opened, but no lie came forth. Between them, on the packed earth floor, lay a shape half shrouded in burlap, a boy's boots poking from one end. Grady's pistol cleared leather in a single breath. "Step away," he ordered. Hannah obeyed, but her eyes glowed in the lantern's light like an animal cornered but unbowed. "You don't understand, sir," she said softly. "It's mercy. All mercy." Grady ignored her plea, knelt by the sack and pulled it back. The boy's face stared skyward, skin waxen, mouth slack. Not dead. Drugged. Breathing shallow as a winter wind. Behind him, Hannah moved. He heard the dry rasp of her words. A prayer? A curse? He never knew. He turned, gun raised, but too late. Something hard cracked the base of his skull, and the cellar swallowed his light whole. Grady woke in the dark, wrists raw against coarse rope. The cellar stank of cold meat and damp earth. Across from him, Hannah knelt by the boy's body, whispering words no Bible ever held. Her hands pressed the boy's brow, then the dirt, over and over, like sowing seeds. When she turned to Grady, her face was not a widow's, but a mask carved by generations of grief and hunger. "You chase secrets for coin, sir," she hissed, "but secrets feed deeper roots than money ever will." She rose, dragging something from the shadows, a rusted saw, the kind butchers favor for bone. Grady struggled, rage boiling behind his ribs. "You'll hang for this," he spat. Hannah laughed, the sound dry as winter leaves. "Hang?" she echoed. "What I do hangs the world together, boy." She stepped closer, the saw's teeth catching the lantern light. "Your bones will feed the orchard. Your truth will rot beneath my roots." She raised the saw, but before it fell, the cellar door above burst wide with Dawn's thin cry. It was Elias York's widow who saved Grady, a pistol in her apron, grief blazing hotter than fear. She'd followed the Pinkertons' trail, half mad with loss. The shot cracked stone and bone. Hannah staggered back, saw slipping from her hand. She looked at the widow, then at Grady, her mouth shaping one final secret no tongue could hold. Then she slumped over the boy's body, her blood soaking burlap and cellar dust. Grady tore his bonds free, fingers numb, mind reeling. He lifted the boy, still breathing, still warm, and staggered up into the dawn. Behind him, the widow's body bled into the soil she'd fed for decades. Roots drink deep. Some say they still do. When Grady returned to Boston, he filed no official report. The boy's father paid his fee, never asking why his son could not speak of what he'd seen. The townsfolk of Kennebunk mumbled about trespassers, meddling strangers, the orchard fire, anything but the cellar's truth. The grey house stood empty through spring, orchard sprouting new shoots even as the widow's blood stained its roots. By summer the trees were heavy with fruit again. Fewer drifters vanished, but some still did. Some secrets do not die with their keeper. They burrow deeper, waiting for the next storm to break the soil open. Years passed. The orchard changed hands. A banker, a merchant, a schoolteacher, who dreamed of retirement in the country. Each time the new owner tore down the grey house. Each time they rebuilt something else, a barn, a tool shed, a new cellar. Always the door stayed. Always the earth beneath stayed hungry. One spring, the schoolteacher's wife vanished. Her bones turned up 5 years later, tangled in the orchard's oldest roots. By then, the teacher had gone mad, mumbling about voices in the walls. The town buried. Hymn in the churchyard, neat stone, clean epitaph. They left the orchard to the crows, but Kennebunk never really forgot. Children dared each other to run through the orchard at dusk, swearing they heard voices whisper from the roots. Some nights, Lantern light flickered among the black branches. A woman's silhouette moving from tree to tree. Hunters lost dogs that way, the animals returning days later, fur-matted, eyes cloudy, bellies full of sweet, rotting fruit. When the wind howled from the river, old men shut their doors tight, muttering prayers older than any church hymn. Some truths burrow deeper than stone. Some hungers pass from hand to hand, mouth to mouth. In 1938, a WPA crew came to flatten the orchard for a new road. They found bones, dozens of them, tiny coffins of root and stone, each tooth a testament to the cellar's truth. The county sheriff ordered them reburied quick and quiet, under concrete and tar. The road bent around the orchard's heart. Some say if you park there at midnight, engine off, windows down, you can hear the shovels scrape, the widow's hymn, a child's ragged breath. The orchard waits, always. You want to know why I tell you this? Why I drag you down this cellar? Because your world wears the same mask Hannah did. Kind, charitable, pious. It feeds you sweetness, while it rots you from within. It promises comfort while it buries your bones under roots of debt, distraction, docility. You think you're free because you have lights in every room, but look closer. The cellar's still there. The orchard still feeds. Every institution you kneel to has its own Hannah. Soft voice, gentle smile, cellar door hidden behind good deeds. Truth? There is no difference between Hannah's orchard and your daily bread. Your mind is the orchard now, seeded by screens, watered by fear, pruned by lies. They fatten you with comfort, hush you with easy sweetness. They bury what's vital under easy distraction. When the time comes to feed, I pluck your will like ripe fruit. You think this is a ghost story? No, it's an anatomy lesson. This is what it looks like when your own hunger devours you, when you trade vigilance for ease, when you forget to check the cellar. But here's the secret the widow never told her pious flock. The cellar door only traps you if you never open it yourself. If you have the spine to descend, torch in hand, you can see what's hidden. Tear out the roots before they drink you dry. Most won't. Most will laugh, shake their heads, click away. Easier to swallow the orchard's fruit, let the bones stay buried. But you, if you've stayed this far, maybe you're different. Maybe you want to swing that lantern wide. So go back to your life, but do it awake. Look at the orchard in your own mind. What fruit are you eating? Who planted it? What roots run beneath your feet while you sleep? Who profits from your comfort, your ignorance, your easy grin in the pew? Ask. Dig. Find the cellar door before it finds you. And when you do, open it wide. Step inside alone. Feed nothing but the truth you find there. This is how you break the cycle. How you salt the orchard so nothing vile grows again. This is not folklore. This is a map. A map carved in bone and salt, fire and teeth. It points to every hidden room inside you, to every lie your fathers believed, to every trick your schools never taught you. Hannah Gray did not die with her orchard. She lives in every soft hand that hushes your questions, in every smile that covers a hook. But her secret is weaker now. She only lives if you forget what you've heard tonight, if you lock this story away, if you let the roots drink deep again. So take it, burn it, carry it into your sleep. And when someone offers you sweet fruit for silence, for obedience, for blind faith, remember the cellar door. Remember what's buried beneath the orchard, and when they come for you with lanterns and prayers, stand firm in the dark and whisper back, I see the cellar door. Twice. Once for the lie, once for the truth, once to open, once to never close again.